Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. This is Wednesday, December 9th, 2020, and this is expected to last about an hour and a half. And this topic is the 2020 Comprehensive Plan Update and Public Hearing Follow-Up, in which we'll discuss this and provide direction. If you'd like to join us, the phone number is 360-252-9020, and the PIN number is 1234. And it's not for public comment, it's just to listen in. I am John Hutchings, the chair of the board. We have Vice Chair Commissioner Ty Menser, Commissioner Gary Edwards. We have County Manager Ramiro Chavez and Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. We have we have Community Development and Economic, we have CPED, Director Josh Cummings and Jennifer Davis, and the Planning Manager, and we have Maya Teeple, Senior Planning. And so here we go, Ramiro.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is a follow-up to the follow-up of the public hearing that you had on December 2nd, and where you had a discussion related to the proposed comp plan amendments. There is a few chapters in here. And just to remind the initial conversation that you had, you discussed the public hearing testimony you received, and as well as you had initial conversation as to how you like to move forward, at least from my point of view. Also, today's conversation, Maya and Josh and his staff is going to walk you through again some of the options, as well as including the Planning Commission recommendations. And it was an additional item that you will be reviewing today. That will be the additional language suggested by Thurston tribes on the health chapter of this proposal. And I just see that Chris Hawkins is joined the conversation. He is going to hopefully walk you through as to what the proposed language is. So there will be staff will ask you at the end of this session to provide direction as to how you'd like to move forward. I'd like to also bring back the option that Commissioner Menser asked, and we briefly addressed that, whether there's an opportunity to have individual resolutions to vote by chapter. And logistically, that is not going to be possible because everything is interrelated. And as Jennifer stated, also is a requirement by GMA in a way that you take a solid single action. Not to say that you, through your legislative duty, you can ask for any type of amendments, request for consideration, and request for additional conversation before the board makes a decision. So that's what I have for you as we begin the conversation.
Thank you, sir. Ready to dig in. Josh?
Hey, Joshua Cummings, Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. We wouldn't be here today without the direction of the Board of County Commissioners and their prioritization of the key topics that community planning has, and the facilitation of the conversation that Jennifer Davis and Maya Teeple and their group have done on this topic and many others to provide the board objective information from the community is that next step in the process for you to make the decision. Our job has been to facilitate this conversation and provide you all of the information that we have gleaned and learned from the community and others, and now is so I just want to say thank you again to the staff for their hard work facilitating this, and thank you to the board for your direction and prioritization of our topics. I will go off camera as per usual and let Jennifer take it away.
And I'll quickly turn it over to Maya. But I wanted to open this work session with a quick acknowledgement and a reminder of where we've been and where we hope to land today at the conclusion of the meeting. So today's work session is the last of several we've had throughout the year on the 2020 package of comprehensive plan amendments. You remember way back, you've made decisions throughout the year on different pieces of what's in the 2020 comp plan amendments. And under Growth Management Act, we take one action at the end of the year on all of those amendments. And so that's why they're coming all at together now, and there will be one resolution to vote on scheduled for next Tuesday. So it's not a big turnaround time. So we hope to get clear direction at the end of this briefing, and I'll let Maya get to it. But at each of these work sessions, we memorialize and acknowledge the board direction. So you've provided direction previously on the Rochester subarea plan. That's a part of these comp plan amendments. You've provided direction previously on the recycled asphalt policy within the Nisqually subarea plan, and that's part of this package of amendments. Today, we're focusing on those remaining pieces where we still need that final board direction, mineral lands, some forest lands, and the health chapter updates. So I really look forward to kind of landing squarely on where the board wants to go so that the resolution that we bring you next Tuesday reflects that final board direction. Go for it, Maya.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. Maya Teeple, Senior Planner with Community Planning. I am going to go ahead and share my screen here. And see, is that PowerPoint visible now to everyone?
Yep.
Good to go. So I do have a short presentation. I've mainly structured this presentation today around the different decision points that the board will need to make. So I will just provide a brief overview. Chris Hawkins with Public Health and Social Services is joining me today to provide some more information on the health chapter and those changes that were requested. We come revisit by the board at the December 2nd meeting. So he will be joining me in the presentation today. But we do have an hour and a half. I expect the presentation to go pretty quickly. So I'm just going to breeze through it. Typical process where I'll ask that we hold discussion until the end. And after we get through the presentation, we can jump back to those slides and take a board vote on different directions if the board is prepared to do that today. So, overview, as I mentioned, structured around the decision points. So I will go through the summary of options again that are before the board. There are two sets of options. One is on the timeline to move these comp plan amendments forward. And then the next set of options is all of the details on the specifics of mineral lands and forestry. And I have a couple overview slides, the options, and then we can bounce around the presentation as needed. So the goal of today's briefing, we are requesting direction from the board on which final options they would like to include in the comprehensive plan adoption, which is scheduled for next Tuesday, the 15th, or if they would like to delay any of these items until 2021 to have further discussions on them. We do need a decision and a direction from the board today if they would like this item to be included in this year's adoption, and that is to allow staff to make the final changes and prepare the resolution for next Tuesday's meeting. So, options for timing moving forward. The board has a few options for the timing of the comprehensive plan amendments, the mineral lands, the long-term forestry, the health, and the parks. And we are looking at three different options on this slide. Option one is if the board wants to move everything forward this year. And in order to do that, we would need decision points on A, C, D, E, and F in this briefing today. This allows us to finalize everything, prep it, and bring it forward on December 15th in that single resolution. Option two is the separating out different elements. So if the board wishes to move forward some elements, but not all of them, let's say parks, health, and forestry, but not mineral lands, then this would be the option we're looking for timeline. This would allow further discussions on mineral lands into 2021, no action on mineral lands this year, but everything else could be done this year. So if the board wishes to separate out certain options and elements, we can absolutely do that today. Depending on what the request is, we would ask for decision points on certain options, for example, F for forestry, if that was moving forward, and then not the mineral lands. And then the third choice is to just delay everything to 2021, continue working on all of these elements, and aim for adoption at the end of next year. So I do want to turn it over to Chris Hawkins and Shelley Slaughter if they have anything to add. This is our public health and social services team that's been working on the health chapter.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chris Hawkins here, Program Manager from Thurston County Public Health and Social Services, and our Director, Shelley Slaughter, is also here for the meeting. And I just wanted to quickly review, since a December 2nd meeting, we indicated that we supported these recommendations from Thurston Thrives as changes to the chapter update on health and human services in the comp plan. And but we did have a couple of word changes that we wanted to have a bit more time to consider and get back to you about. And this is our recommendation at this point, which bottom line is that we are in support of all of the suggested changes from Thurston Thrives. We believe that that would be an improvement to the chapter by addressing more of the health equity dimensions that have come out of the community health assessment that we worked with Thurston Thrives on in 2019, and also in a health equity, a racial equity assessment that we conducted this year. These recommendations, though, we have a couple of minor changes that we want to suggest. So for the Thurston Thrives recommendation number 2, we would suggest deleting one word, the word significantly, from that recommendation. For the Thurston Thrives recommendation number 5, the policy subpoint number 9, we wanted to recommend changing the word equality to equity. And in both of those cases, the source for that would be the 2 assessments that I just referenced. And the third change that we would recommend is replacing in the 8th recommendation of Thurston Thrives, which is regarding healthy eating and nutrition, that policy, replacing the word especially with particular attention to. We don't believe that these changes change the substantive recommendations made by Thurston Thrives, but do provide a good deal more clarity and accuracy in how they are included in the comprehensive plan chapter. So that's what we have on the health chapter recommendations. Some final suggestions there on the other recommendations, 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 9. We did not have any changes. We support those fully, and would greatly appreciate the board's support in moving the chapter forward with these changes. And I'll open it up to any comments that Shelley would like to add about this. We did prepare a memo that we included with your materials for today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Chris. I think that really accurately reflects the perspective of our department. I strongly support the recommendations that came forth through public comment from Thurston Thrives. I think that this plan is an excellent opportunity to really establish these 4 priorities, which are both reflected in our department strategic plan, as well as what I know is a priority of the Board of Health and Board of County Commissioners. So I think these are excellent additions that I recommend that the board approve.
Thank you, Shelley. Any questions for me, Commissioners?
I can open it up, but let's hold all the comp plan, the other stuff for the end, but we'll do health now, okay? So we don't get it lost in the middle, if that makes sense.
That's great.
Commissioner Menster, do you have anything regarding this piece?
No, I support these recommendations.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, I have a question. When we're making adjustments to the comp plan like we're doing now, did this go through the Planning Commission for a recommendation?
The chapter did go to the Planning Commission, and it did not include these specific changes that were noted in public comment to the board. However, the chapter holistically was reviewed by the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission did recommend it be included in the final set of amendments that moved forward. That being said, based on public comment, the board does have legislative discretion to act on including new information that we receive in public comment from the hearings that we have.
I guess, does this apply to these proposals by Thurston Thrives?
What do you mean?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. The options put in the comp plan by Thurston Thrives, did they go through the Planning Commission?
No, these same comments were not part of the testimony that was received on the comprehensive plan draft chapter update for Chapter 11 Health and Human Services when it came through the Planning Commission. These were new comments from the community that came through the public hearing that was with the Board of County Commissioners.
I need a point of clarification. This did go through, but these changes we're looking at, word changes have not gone through, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I do have one comment to add to that. Having had the honor to participate and listen in on some of the conversations that the Planning Commission had prior to these recommendations that came through public comment. And I think that it was clear from the Planning Commission, from my perspective, that that inclusivity was a strong value that came across from all members, and they wanted to make sure that this was a plan that represented everyone. And I feel like with the additional language proposed by Thurston Thrives in terms of racial equity, that while it is definitely an emphasis and prioritizes us in having a responsibility to address the disparities that we see in our community in these areas that these chapters address, I feel like it is still inclusive and meets the values and intent from my perspective of what I heard from the Planning Commission. It does not take away or detract from the original language. It adds to it and complements it.
Okay, that's all I was wondering, how it had fit in. Thank you. That's my only question.
Okay, I have just two questions. You can answer them together, Chris, or Shelley. These changes that we're looking at just now, are they a thumbs up from Thurston Thrives? They've seen them and they're okay with it? Because as you said, Chris, this doesn't substantively change. And even though we're looking at antics with semantics, the intent remains constant. So have these changes been run by Thurston Thrives? And who's on the review committee from PHSS that worked on this?
Okay. No, we have not taken our department's responses to Thurston Thrives, although a couple of us are members of the Thurston Thrives coordinating council. No, we did not take it back to the leadership of Thurston Thrives to review what our department had as responses. The committee or the staff who worked on this from Public Health and Social Services included myself, Marianne O'Garo, the epidemiologist who worked on the community health assessment in 2019, and the the racial equity assessment in 2020, and both of those were done in collaboration with Thurston Thrives. And the other staff were Art Starry, who obviously is engaged in the environmental health parts of the chapter, Leslie Price, who is our public health nutritionist, to look at the healthy eating recommendation, and Shelley. I believe that was the main folks that I was reaching out to get some broader perspective on what these changes would mean in the chapter.
Thank you, Chris. I mean, that's a real broad spectrum, and that's good to include Thurston Thrives, and the PHSS staff are also on Thurston Thrives. And again, like I said, even though we make some changes, it substantively does not change, and the intent remains the same. That's why I wouldn't imagine. I don't want to speak. I can't speak for Thurston Thrives, but I wouldn't imagine they would have an issue with this. Just the couple changes that we have. So that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
We'll add that in full transparency, I represent Thurston County on the Thurston Thrives executive team, which consists of David Schaffert, Doug Ma, Taylor Igardo, Megan, so formerly Sullivan. I apologize, I cannot.
Goldenberg.
Oh, what her current surname is,
Yeah.
as well as Carolyn Cox from the city of Lacey, and Chris Wells, the executive director of United Way, all sit on that executive committee and approved the recommendations and nominated Taylor and Mr. Ma to carry forward these recommendations. So it was endorsed by the Thurston Thrives Executive Committee, but not the full Thurston Thrives Coordinating Council.
Well, I looked at these
I did not
iterations.
participate in that particular piece of the conversation.
Okay.
Which
And
one?
look at these iterations. I'm not concerned with it because the intent remains the same. And I think it's a vital part to be included. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
So what I'm hearing, the board is in agreement to move forward with the proposed recommendations on the health chapter.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yep, so, okay, thank you. Moving forward with the recommendations for chapter 11, that will be the health and human services chapter of the proposed comp plan amendment. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great. So we will work on updating this draft chapter before it comes forth on next week to include those recommendations.
And
So,
Maya, just
yep.
to reiterate, we're going to hold these questions until you are done.
Yes. So the rest of this is going to be all mineral lands and forestry, and then we can have a big discussion at the end of it on moving forward. So looking at the decision points again, there are 4 decision points for mineral lands and 1 decision point for the long-term forestry consideration. I'm going to go through these each point by point again and give a very high level summary. It's not going to be as in-depth as past briefs, but just checking in on each of these decision points, and then we can come back and have discussion around each of them, and if the board is prepared to take direction on each of these. So moving forward, decision point A is the first decision point for mineral lands, and this is for co-designation of agriculture with mineral lands. This impacts the map that is being developed, the redo map, which is map N2, designated mineral lands map, the designation criteria in chapter 3, and in addition to that, it does affect some policies and some code language. So option A1 is the option that maps the current designation criteria, and that does not co-designate mineral lands with agricultural lands. That's about 2,100 acres less of mineral lands that it overlaps with ag lands that would not be co-designated. We did receive a lot of public comments for the board public hearing that were in favor of option A1. About 95% of the comments that we received supported that. And I do want to note that one of the considerations of option A1 is that it could limit the flexibility of farmers who have both areas on their property, as they may not be able to use both uses. Option A2 was the Planning Commission recommendation, and that does co-designate areas of agriculture and mineral lands. That means there's about 2,100 acres of agricultural lands that overlay with mineral resource lands where either resource use could be used. And if option A2 proceeds, there is some additional language, both policy language and code language, that was developed by the stakeholder group back in March to mitigate for some of the concerns about reclamation after mining and those lands being returned to agriculture. And that language would be included if option A2 moves forward. Just to go over the map again, this is the updated version of the designated mineral resource lands map. And the lighter colors are just the designated mineral lands that don't overlay with any other resource use except for forestry. And the darker areas are the areas where we have agricultural lands overlaid with mineral resource lands. So most of this color, the lighter color, would be on the map if A1 moves forward, and if A2 moves forward, the darker areas would be the additional area that would also be mapped. So moving into the C options, this is the option that considers how far a resource use notice is required from designated mineral lands for plat developments. So when someone comes in for a plat permit at the Building and Development Center, if they're within a certain distance of a resource use area, forestry, agriculture, or mineral lands, they have to file a resource use notice with that permit that gets recorded. And it's just a notice that says that mining could occur in this area and that it's a priority use in that area. And it lets folks know that there could be mining as a future use in that area. So option C1 is the current code language, and that requires 1,000-foot distance from any sort of designated mineral lands. So any plat within 1,000 feet from a designated mineral lands would get that notice recorded with it. It maintains the current code language. It is consistent with state law, and it has a greater notification proximity. I do want to note that back in 2003, the board did amend the language from 500 to 1,000 feet due to concerns about mining and noticing being properly issued. Option C2 is a change to the current code, which would lessen that requirement to 500 feet. So that is still consistent with state law. The minimum distance under state law required is 500 feet. And this option was recommended as a possible alternative by the stakeholder group. You will notice that there were not many written comments received on either of these options, but we did receive more that were in favor of C1, which maintains the current code language, and C1 of 1,000 feet was also the Planning Commission recommendation. So now moving into the fund options for mineral lands. The D options are the expansion policies and when mining can occur on undesignated lands. Option D1, as it's currently written, only allows mining on designated mineral lands, whether it is an expansion of an existing operation or it is a new operation. It would only be allowed to be permitted if it was on that map. Option D2 would allow expansion onto undesignated lands, and that would be kept off at any operation that is in place at the time of adoption. They would be allowed to expand even if the lands adjacent to them are not designated. And this was developed through stakeholder work. This is moderately easy to implement by our Building and Development Center, but it allows some flexibility to the industry. And option D3 is the Planning Commission recommendation, which allows expansion on undesignated lands, the same as option D2, but then has additional allowances where new mines could also be permitted within the 1,000-foot distance that is not designated from a donated park, or if there's a barrier within that 1,000 feet from a park, like a railroad or an industrial use that's occurring in that area. The D2 and D3 options, as I discussed on the December 2nd meeting, were developed by the stakeholder group as alternatives, acknowledging the 1,000-foot in the designation criteria and some of the industry representatives having concerns over that being outright not designated. So D2 and D3 do offer allowances to the industry in that area. Most of the comments we received were in favor of option D1, a modified version of it that would be a little bit more flexible, so it would fall somewhere in the middle of D1 and D2, and it would allow expansion when a park is donated or into the 1,000 feet from a UGA. We did also receive some comments in favor of D3. So wide range on these options, and you really see the two sides, those in favor of D1 and those in favor of D3. So moving into the E options, these are options around how the map gets interpreted at the permit scale when someone comes in for a permit. So as I've mentioned previously, the map is not based on parcel boundaries, it is based on geology. So it does not necessarily conform with parcel lines, and it can split right through a parcel. A parcel might have half mineral lands on it and half not. So how is that handled at the permitting stage when someone wants to come in and apply for a permit? And there's 3 options around that. So the first option, E1, has a double threshold designation that requires at least a 1/4 acre and at least 5% to have that designated mineral lands mapped on the property in order to be eligible for permitting. Option E2 was the Planning Commission recommendation, and this option says if any amount is mapped on the property, then the whole property is eligible for a permit, and that includes the areas within the 1,000-foot area that are undesignated. Option E3 requires that the entire parcel must be mapped in order to be eligible for a permit. So we did receive significant public comment on these options as well. The most comment we received was around option E1, and folks who commented on that were requesting a modification to that option. Specifically that at least 20% be required to be designated and slightly more acres, however much that would come out to. We also received some comments in favor of option E2, which is if any amount is designated, then the whole parcel is eligible for a permit. So moving into the forestry options, there are 7 parcels that are being considered for removal from the long-term forestry designation with an associated land use change and a zoning change to those parcels. That's about 173 acres as long-term forestry that is being considered to be removed and changed to rural residential resource 1 unit per 5 acres. There's 2 options before the board today. Option F1 is no change, leave all of those parcels as they currently are. That would not affect the landowners in any way. They would still be under the same zone that they are currently. So it does not limit their ability to do anything. They are just under the existing zone that they are already within. Option F2 would be to remove any number of those parcels or all of those parcels from the long-term forestry designation and to change the land use and zoning to rural residential resource 1 to 5. The Planning Commission did recommend option F2. They recommended that all 7 parcels be removed from the long-term forestry designation and have the land use and zoning changed. And just to show a map of where those parcels are, we have 3 that are just north of Highway 8 in the northwestern part of Thurston County. There's 1 parcel E that's kind of due west of the Olympia area. Parcel D is at the south end of the Capitol Forest. And then there are 2 parcels, F and G, that are around 80 acres that are just south of Rainier. So those are the 7 parcels that were identified out of a whole county review. We did review all of the edge areas of this long-term forestry area, and only those 7 were identified as possible exclusions from the long-term forestry area. So now I'm jumping back to the time frame and options around next steps. As I mentioned, there's really 3 different directions the board could take these amendments in right now. The first is if the board wishes to move everything forward, health, parks, mineral lands, and forestry, then we would be looking for decisions on all of those points today for us to finalize the resolution and bring that forward on the 15th. Option 2 is if you want to separate elements, you can choose to do so, depending on which elements you want to move forward. For example, if health, parks, and forestry went forward, we would only be looking for direction on the F option today. And then different elements could be pulled and discussed later in 2021. And the third option is to continue discussions on this into 2021 and delay all of the elements into next year. And my last slide, Jennifer did mention this at the beginning of the brief, but I do want to talk a little bit about the final resolution and ordinance and why we're in this bind. And we've been considering a lot of different amendments and how they all get rolled in. So the comprehensive plan, which includes sub-area plans and joint plans, can only be amended once per year. And that is a requirement under the Growth Management Act. So there is a single resolution and a single adopting action that is taken in order to amend the comp plan. And we're bound by that due to state law. What will be included in the final resolution on December 15th? So this year, the board has already made decision points on some items. The first was the Rochester sub-area plan, and then all the way back in August, after the board held a public hearing, the board did provide direction to staff, a unanimous direction to include that in the final resolution. So that plan has been all formatted and finalized, and that is ready to go on the 15th. That will be rolled into the resolution. The second item is the recycled asphalt policy, E5, in the Nisqually sub-area plan. The board had a final briefing on that on December 2nd. And at that time, a majority of the board, 2-1, did provide direction to move this forward at this time, with Commissioner Mentzer stating that prefer it be reviewed with the Nisqually sub-area plan holistically. So that policy, the amendment with best management practices, is included in the final resolution. And then the final item is the 2020 comprehensive plan update, what we've been referring to as the continuing items. And that is forestry, health, parks, and mineral lands. And really the only two pieces of that we're need specific direction on from the board today is forestry and mineral lands. The rest of the chapters are kind of as is pending the health recommendations. So if we receive that direction today, that would be included in the final resolution as well. And that concludes my presentation. And now we can have discussion on the items and walk through them and discuss further as needed.
Maya, that was very intense and comprehensive, but very thorough update. Thank you. You must be dreaming about this stuff. I'll start with Gary. Do you have any questions of Maya or any staff?
I just want to make sure that we know that the Planning Commission made these recommendations. I think you've got them highlighted in yellow, yep. Right? And yes. How long has this been ongoing, that they've been working on this, the Planning Commission?
The Planning Commission has been working on the comprehensive plan update since 2017. Mineral land specifically has been ongoing that most of that time. The forestry, the parks, and the health chapter really came to be about late last year and early this year. So.
Okay. I don't know as I have any more questions other than I would like to continue the recommendation that was made, I don't know, back on the 2nd, that we move forward with the recommendations from the Planning Commission.
Okay. Commissioner Mentzer, questions or comments?
Sure. For the record, I think Maya, on the recycled asphalt, I believe that was a 2-0 vote. I think I abstained from the vote because I just didn't want it to be construed as I'd made up a decision on the substantive amendment, but I did want it to be holistically reviewed with the Nisqually sub-area plan. I can go through each of these. At the last briefing section, I know both commissioners talked about the Planning Commission recommendations and supporting them, and I didn't actually get to sort of outline my opinion, so I don't know how we're going to go about this, but it sounds like Commissioner Edwards is still with the Planning Commission recommendations, so we know what those are. So I'm just going to tick through where I'm at on each piece, and then Commissioner Hutchings can weigh in. Starting with the DIP co-designation issue, I'm not in line with the Planning Commission on that. I'm in line with the Thurston County Agricultural Advisory Committee, the staff recommendation, several other environmental groups, and 95% of the public comment, which is to support A1. And this is one I'm kind of puzzled by. I didn't think, honestly, I thought this would be something that the commissioners might be in agreement on. I'm going to quote from the Thurston County Agricultural Advisory Committee letter, not because they're more important than anyone else, but it's a group that I know all three of the commissioners put a lot of reliance on their opinion and expertise. They wrote to us with strong opposition to co-designation of mineral lands with agricultural lands. The reason was that co-designation, the reason for that position is that Thurston County is facing a crisis of farmland loss and a failure of farmland preservation. I'm just picking sentences from it. In Thurston County, we currently designate only 15,878 acres of our total 62,250 acres of farmland as being of long-term commercial significance, which is a smaller percentage than any other Puget Sound county. We simply don't need another 2,000 plus acres of mineral resource lands, particularly when these lands will be added at the expense of our already low acres of protected farmland. So I think the context is really important here. What we're doing in this comprehensive plan update and this remapping is already a great, significant expansion of mapped mineral lands, even without the inclusion of the 2,119 acres of long-term significant agricultural land. And I think that's where the staff's that was my understanding at the front end of these briefings of why the staff recommended A1. I think it's, I asked some questions at the last briefing to try to highlight the point that Thurston County is unique in having such, it's just our unique geology of how we were formed, that we have a lot of mineral land versus agricultural land. And you could have a totally different ratio in a different county. So it's really apples to oranges. But in our county, we don't have a lot of, we don't have a robust ratio of agricultural to mineral land. And if you look above my head at the seal of Thurston County, there's not a gravel mine on that seal. There's a farm, and the agricultural lands are intrinsic to our local economy, to our local health, to our local culture. I think folks, we think of ourselves historically as an agriculturally based county, and we're going to have a hard time protecting that character when housing prices, here are cheaper than Pierce and King County, and there's a growing population in Western Washington. People are going to want to come to Thurston County, and we're going to have to make sure we protect our agricultural areas of long-term significance. So for all of those reasons, I'm supporting A1. On C, I don't think there's I think everybody agrees on C1, Planning Commission and all the commissioners and all of the public comment, so I'm not going to comment on that. D and E are more tricky. They're more technical. Where I landed on D was you said there were some folks that that landed kind of between D1 and D2. I kind of landed between D2 and D3. So I'll call my position a modified D2, where I would, D2 was kind of the compromise position. D1 was the more restrictive. D3 was the more permissive. I liked D2, but I would make two changes up to that. One is the exception for parks, I would limit that to donated parks. But I would add the flexibility of the existing barrier that's part of D3. I would say that you could mine into the 1,000-foot separation where there was an existing barrier, and that was a part of D3. And then on E, I also favor, again, the middle. They're in reverse order in this one, or they're in a reverse order where E2 I think is the most restrictive and E3 is the most permissive, or vice versa. E1 is actually kind of the middle position, but I favor a modified E1 where you would have, instead of a double threshold, I would favor a single threshold of 20%. And there's a lot of citizen comment kind of explaining why that makes some sense. So, and then on F, staff recommended F1, and I don't see a reason to make the change to F2. There hasn't been a lot of comment or discussion about that, but I support F1, not the Planning Commission's recommendation of F2. We need to protect our long-term forestry zoning, and there isn't a compelling reason offered to make that change, those changes.
Anything else on time?
That's it. Those are my positions.
Okay. Gary, anything else to refute or back up, or just what you've said?
No, sir. I'm still
Okay.
there.
I've heard from, and I've spoken with more than a dozen citizens, friends, or organizations each of whom I respect, and quite frankly, many of them I like. They're just smart people. And they are every bit of what the Planning Commission has recommended, what staff has recommended, and even some of the options that Commissioner Mentor has even proffered. They're all over the map on this, no pun intended, map. And what we're trying to do is, of course, here we are setting an overarching policy. This is not site specific, it's not permit specific. This is very high level, as Maya said, very high level that we're doing. And in taking all of these comments and discussions that I've had with these folks over quite some time, and again, they're coming from different positions. I am with the Planning Commission recommendation on A2, C1, D3, E2, and F2. It's just interesting that D3, was that the one you had a modification perhaps, Ty? A modification of D3?
I had D2 with one of the elements of D3 added to it.
So if that were to be a 2-to-1 direction on that one, what does this do to the entire plan? Does it still comes back to us when we do it on Tuesday, or what happened?
A 2-to-1 direction on, can you clarify on what?
On the modification of D2 and 3.
On D2 and 3. So
yeah,
what I'm looking, I mean, we can go through each of these and take a preliminary vote from the board, but it will all be wrapped into one action before the board on Tuesday. So I'm not going to, it won't be motion for D2, motion for E3. It'll be motion to approve the comprehensive plan with amendments to mineral lands, health, long-term forestry. So
what I'm hearing is perhaps Commissioner Hutchins would like to hear what the recommendations on D1, D2, and D3. I believe Commissioner Minster provided a recommendation, a modified D2 that included donated parks and existing barriers. Mm-hmm. And I believe Commissioner Hutchins would like to explore that to see if there is a vote on that specific one. I don't think he was expecting to have a separate vote on Tuesday. It's just
no, not a separate vote.
The modification on the proposal that Commissioner Messer had on the D options.
Well, I'll even make it simpler than that. I really don't want to muddy the water. Now, I was intrigued by the E1 recommendation that Commissioner Messer put forth with the 20% threshold rather than the quarter or 5%. But I'm ready to look at I also look at the flexibility to the industry, some flexibility, most flexibility. I'm ready to vote on every one of these, the Planning Commission recommendation.
So that's it?
That's it. And some people will be happy and some will be disappointed. I realize that.
Okay, so just to conclude that, on Tuesday, you will see a resolution. They will have a single action. They will include all the recommendations from the Planning Commission on that includes A2, C1, D3, E2, F2. In addition, you will see the Rochester Severia plan that the board approved already a couple of months ago. And also you will see the recycle asphalt policy E5 as part of that ordinance as well. So, and I believe that is the direction that I got today.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to turn to Jennifer or Maya. Do you have any questions? Do you get anything clarified?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I don't. It was very clear. Thank you, Romero, for restating it.
Thank you, Romero. Is there anything else? Romero,
Not from me.
No, I'm just disposing of my garbage. Sorry.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. No, that's fine. I thought you were done.
No. You
Okay.
disappear from the screen.
I'm walking out.
So
Josh,
I think this meeting is ended at your discretion. I don't think any additional direction is requested from the board related to these items.
I just want to circle back to Josh. Do you have anything to add, sir? This is your team that is just phenomenally awesome. Thank you. All right, thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.